Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show, by any host, or by any guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before you begin any new diet, exercise, or training program. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. On Healing Ties, we're creating a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories and resources and being with awesome people like you. Now that caregiving has ended, let the Healing Ties begin. Here's your host, Chris McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Chris McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy, and we're here for our fourth episode of Prepare to Care with my good friend, Jane Barton. Jane, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be back.
We're into week 4. And last week we talked about resistance to assistance. We talked about the geese flying and how important it was for them to be collaborative and create a team. But I think this week's topic, and we're going to let our listeners know right off the bat, we're going to go straight through today's show. We're not going to take any breaks because we both feel that this topic is not only but important, but sometimes, oftentimes misunderstood. An area that we both hold near and dear to us, the blessings of hospice and palliative care. Before we get into that, just remind our listeners a little bit about you and the great work that you're doing, not only in Denver, but nationwide.
Well, I am an educational consultant. My company is Cardinal LLC, and as such, I speak, write, and listen about the topics I'm absolutely passionate about, and that's aging, caregiving, and end-of-life care. I have the privilege to serve as the caregiving ambassador for AARP Colorado, so I do about 50 programs throughout the state of Colorado, and the rest of my time is spent traveling around the country and working with a variety of clients. But in all venues, I am focused on issues that are typically of concern not only to family caregivers, but also to professional care providers as well.
And you're doing a podcast series with me. I'm very honored about this, Jane. This has been delightful, and I'm sure our listeners are enjoying this. And today's topic is often misunderstood, hospice and palliative care. And I know we've both had both personal and professional experiences in hospice and palliative care. But why do you think there's such a misunderstanding about this terrific service?
Well, we've noted, I think, in one of the previous podcasts that we live in a society that is scared to death of death. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to recognize the reality of mortality. We don't want to realize that we're finite creatures, that we have an end at some point. And so we just don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about it. And there is so much fear. There's so much anxiety that people equate hospice with death. And when you hear the word hospice, the majority of the time, people just shut down. And I recognized this when I was serving as a community educator for the Pallaitive Care Institute here in Denver. I served as the director for about 6 years, creating curricula on all aspects of end-of-life care. My greatest challenge was to get people in the door. I had to create some very interesting titles to programs so that we're not frightening to people.
Right.
So once I got them in the room, I shut the door and locked it. but in all honesty, that was a significant, real challenge. And so what I learned is that instead of using the word hospice when I was talking to a family or even an audience, before I would use that term, I would describe the essence of hospice before. Mm-hmm. I would identify the goals and the objectives and how this particular philosophy of care could help their family. And after I describe all the benefits and the blessings, then I would say, and what do you think this service is called, this type of care? And for many people, they would be shocked to learn that hospice is a life-giving approach to care. And hospice, yes, it is a special kind of care that's reserved for persons who have a terminal illness, and they are deemed to have less than 6 months to live. But this compassionate collaborative approach to care allows families to come together and work with an interdisciplinary team of clinicians to identify the goals of care, to identify what they think is the most important thing to achieve in the end of this journey. They also have the ability to talk about advanced directives, what people wish for at the end of life regarding medical care. They recognize that illness is a personal challenge, but it's also a family challenge. So hospice serves both the patient and family as defined. It could be extended family or even include friends. And hospice, they are experts in pain and symptom management. And so a lot of our fear, I think, around death is about the dying process, worrying if we're going to be in pain or if we can have our symptoms managed well. Well, hospice, they are experts at this, as you well know.
Very much so. And as I think about your experience and mine as well, when we get into the hospice field and we learn a little bit about it, we go into it, appreciate your response to this, kind of reluctantly because we don't really know about it. But then once we're in it and we see the beauty of how families are treated, especially when life transitions, and everybody's life is going to transition. There's just a part of this program that just brings about so much peace and comfort that is often missing in the day-to-day realm and roller coaster rides of caregiving.
Well, I know that when I was considering serving as a chaplain intern at local hospice, to be honest, that was absolutely the last place I thought I would ever serve because I had some real issues around death predicated on my experience in my own family. We were like any other typical family in the United States. We did not talk about death. We did not prepare for death, and that did not serve us well. So when I was considering this particular internship, my spiritual director actually said, "This is where you need to go. This is part of your work." Well, he knew me better than I knew myself. And I realized after being there for 3 days that exactly where I needed to be to do a lot of healing around the losses that I'd had in my own life. And serving individuals and their families as they were making this journey toward the end of the road, as they were confronting the fact that their loved one was dying, they were teaching me how to live.
Right.
And that is one of the greatest gifts of that journey, is to realize that none of us has anything more than right now. That's all we have. We live as if we have forever, but that is an illusion. And when we live in the moment, present to right now, understanding just what a gift that is, we become so much more appreciative of our life and more intentional about how we choose to live. And that is something that I have carried with me since I served as a hospice chaplain, and it has enriched my life. It truly was a blessing.
Living a life of intention is really a goal that we all want to obtain. We all go about it, differently. And I'm reminded about a story that I experienced in hospice. It was this big burly doctor that came in to talk to the class, and you looked at him, and he was kind of rough and gruff around the edges. But then as he started to talk about his transition from curative to palliative, I remember this like it was yesterday. He just kind of broke down and cried because he had thought that he had the power to cure everything and anybody. When he made that transition into palliative care and hospice, he recognized that he was doing better work because he understood he could not solve everybody's health problems. He could not cure every disease, but he could be present, people in their family and their life transition. And I just come away from that impression of how we can all be transformed when we just have a little bit of openness and understanding to the process.
Wow. Wow, what an amazing story.
Yeah, it's left an impression on me that story's probably, it's 2002. So we're 16 years past that, and I still remember it like he was sitting right in front of us.
Well, there are so many stories of transformation that actually occur in that part of the journey, and certainly within the realm of hospice and palliative care. I know that I've experienced both sides of the equation. When my mom was dying back in the 70s, early 80s, we didn't even have the option of hospice in the small town that I grew up in West Texas. It wasn't available. But then my father, 17 years later, we had hospice at the very late in his process, so it wasn't of as much benefit as it could have been. And then recently my brother, who died 2 years ago, also was on hospice care. So I think the greatest benefits that I recognize when I was able to be with my brother when he was dying, because hospice was with us. I didn't have to be a hospice chaplain. I didn't have to be on the lookout for everything that needed to be done to care for my brother. Mm-hmm. I could just be a sister, and I could hold his hand. I could be at his bedside. I could pray. I could cry. I could laugh. I could share stories with other family members and friends who were there. But because we had the hospice professionals there taking care of all the clinical aspects and the logistics, we as a family and all of our friends, we were able to be with my brother. And that was time that we would never get back. And those are moments and memories that we will cherish for the rest of our lives.
And sometimes it is just all about just being. There's nothing that says we have to be anything but just attentive and hold their hand. And I think about the analogy between the birthing process and the dying process, where today, as a woman is getting ready to give birth, the family's there in the maternity room. Everybody's welcoming the new birth, the new child into the family. And why can't we have that same attention and comfort when a life transition at the end of life? Why are people afraid to be in the room when their life transition? I know for me, it was the first time that happened. Not only was it traumatic, but it was quite beautiful, because I sensed that. And not only did I sense, I recognized that they were going to a better place. They were going to a different place. And then when Richard made his life transition, it was that same experience when I held him and said goodbye. It really wasn't a goodbye. It was a so long. We learned to live with them differently. So many of us are, for whatever reason, are not comfortable in talking about what happens when life comes to an end. And I think that's why it's important to have these open and honest conversations.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's important to have people who are experts in the field, the hospice professionals, who can educate us to know what to expect. What's interesting in our society today is that we are very removed from the dying process, because we have hospitals and ICUs and long-term care, and all of that is fabulous. But being present at the bedside is not the norm like it was 2 or 3 generations ago. So we don't know what to expect, and it's frightening. So with hospice there, they can explain how a body actually begins to shut down through the dying process and what to look for. And if you hear a certain thing, don't be afraid. Your loved one's not suffering. So with that education and that shepherding, you can be present to that moment. And it's so important, because as I was sharing with some friends when I got back from my brother's death a few years ago, that was a moment not to be missed. And my family we're golfers. To have been part of our family, you had to play golf. So we used a lot of golf terminology. So I said, no, I didn't get a mulligan on that particular experience in my life. I didn't get a do-over.
Right.
And so I wanted to be there. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Now, I'm not trying to say that it's all smiles and bliss. I mean, there are really tough times in that companioning. And it's the ups and downs, it's the joys and the sorrows, it's all of that. And just like life, it's messy with all the emotions that are bubbling up.
Right.
But I wouldn't have missed that. I would not have missed that moment with my brother and our dear friends and family. I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
I really thank you for sharing that experience, and I agree 100%. I just wouldn't, his transition, I was reminded that he was in control the entire time. And we think, and we've talked about control numerous times during our series already. And I hearken back to the day that he made his life transition, and he looked at me from his bed. He moved his head to signal me to come over to his side, and the people that were there. And when he made his life transition, that's the people he wanted. It was the two reporters from the Sun Sentinel, and he died very peacefully. Mm-hmm. And what I remember from that experience is I thought that I was in control the whole time, but he really was. He was the one that was in control. And it was about just being present to him, as it was to you and your brother.
But I think a lot of people are afraid of that. So some of that fear can be allayed if we access the available resources. And hospice, I think, is something that people need to, number one, understand this particular type of medical philosophy before you need it. Mm-hmm. So you can go out to a website, NHPCO, which is a National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, and there's a wealth of information about what is the philosophy of hospice, what does that mean, what services are provided, how do you enroll, to learn that it's a Medicare benefit. All of the very important information that you need to know about it is there online. And it's a wonderful website in case if you don't know anything about hospice, it's a great place to start.
And these conversations are the ones that you want to have early on in the process. You don't want to be having conversations like this on your way to the hospital in an ambulance. And unfortunately, all too often, we hesitate to have these really delicate, real life. Really backtrack just a second. I was fortunate. I knew exactly what Richard wanted because we had the conversation. My wish for people who are listening to this podcast, and I'm pretty sure you will agree, is find that comfort zone where you can have the conversation so that you know what everybody's wishes are when it comes to the time that these decisions have to be made. Because oftentimes they're made in the middle of an emergency.
Right, and the whole concept of advanced directives, that is the documentation. But even before you fill out a form, you must have the conversation with the people that will be responsible for your care, that will be involved in it. And even before you have the conversation, you have to do the self-reflection. What are my values? What do I value, quality or quantity? Where do I want to be? Who do I want in the room? All of those things, and this takes time. You don't just fill out a form in 30 minutes and it's done. And it's an iterative process too, because what I wanted at 25 was quite different than what I want today at 60. Our perspective changes as far as healthcare interventions and the like. But, having the ongoing conversation and allowing that to organically evolve is critically important. And then for the legal aspects, to document it, to have it in writing, and make sure those forms are distributed. Critically important.
Goodness. And this reminds me that topic, over and above all of the topics that we're touching on during our 6 series podcast, Jane, this is something that I think I would like to propose to you that we flush out a little bit more, and maybe after the 6 series is over, is do a full series on hospice and palliative care and really talk about the importance. And not that we didn't touch on it today, but I'm just thinking that 25 minutes just really hasn't done this topic the justice that that is needed.
No, and I think it would be a lovely conversation, and the importance of it is evidenced by a wealth of information that I've been doing some research on. I'm developing some new programming for 2018, and interesting enough, in 2017 and even now into early 2018, there are numerous books being published by hospice and palliative care doctors who are in the trenches, who are serving patients. And the mantra, the chorus from all of these clinical experts is you have to be an active participant in your medical care. You have to voice what you want, what you wish for, and equally as important, what you don't want. And they are saying if we are not going to be active participants, then there is this almost domino effect that occurs at critical turning points in your medical care,
right.
And it's hard to stop the dominoes from falling. And you can end up in a situation that is the worst case scenario. So we have to be very proactive in
We
this.
have to be very proactive instead of reactive, because if you don't have a plan in place, in most cases, the state living in, they will have a plan for you. And it's pretty much guaranteed that you're not going to like their plan.
Yep. So this goes back to my whole control issue. I want to be in control.
Are we coming back to control again? Okay.
I know. I am a staunch advocate for, let's participate in this conversation.
I'm just really thrilled to have an open and honest conversation with you about a very delicate topic, the blessings of hospice and palliative care. Now, Jamie, just got a couple of minutes left. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you. And I just want to add that I just really believe this is in our last conversation about this important topic.
So stay tuned.
Oh, you got that. That's pretty good.
That's right. Well, if anyone wants to check out a little bit more about what I do and what I'm about, go to my website at cardinallife.com. You can check on upcoming events if you're in the Colorado area, or you can also click on media links, which will take you to some online resources. If you have a particular question or comment, you can contact me at cardinallife@msn.com, and I would love to continue the conversation.
And I'm loving continuing our conversations Jane. This has just been very enlightening. And, next week we are going to talk about what do you have to lose? And it's kind of a continuation from today's conversation, but we're going to be talking a little bit about grief and loss. So I'm looking forward to having that visit with you as well. But thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodness gracious, St. Ignatius, what a wonderful conversation we had today on a topic that's often difficult to chat about, hospice and palliative care. But we welcome your comments and feedback. Send us an email at wecare@wholecarenetwork.com, and be sure to join us next week for episode 5, What Do You Have to Lose? I'm your host, Chris McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy. I'm creating a life to love after caregiving ends through radio, writing, travel, advocacy, and being with awesome people like Jane Barton. Healing Ties and Prepare to Care are part of the Whole Care Network. Visit us online at wholecarenetwork.com, where you can meet our show host, listen to all our shows, especially our podcast series featuring Jane Barton. Make it a great week, everyone. Be well. Bye-bye.